I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. As promised, and I'm very happy to have her joining us here. Is at after some effort and time, most of which was my own fault, just over the last couple of years, trying to reach out, having read the article we talked about, also linked in the show description below, involving the relationship, actually called Framing Resistance, Call and Response, reading Assata Shakur's Black Revolutionary Radicalism in Palestine, written by our next guest, Dr. Rabab Ibrahim Abdulhadi, who, among many other things, is the founding director and senior scholar of Arab and Muslim Ethnicities and Diaspora Studies program at San Francisco State University. She is co-founding editorial board member of Islamophobia Studies Journal, lead editor of book volumes and author of over 80 articles and book chapters in 7 languages. You can read the rest of her bio and get more in the show description, where all of that is written and linked. And again, Dr. Abdulhadi, welcome to the program. It's good to see you.
Thank you for having me. I am so happy to be on this program. And I would just say, yes, I think also some of the fault is mine, because I completely forgot about the last time we were supposed to meet. And I never, ever forget. I think I didn't put it on my calendar. So when it didn't pop up afterwards, like in the evening, in the middle of the night, I'm like, I was supposed to be, how can I miss it? My sincere apologies to you and your listeners. So I'm
no, I appreciate that, and it's good that we're finally catching up. And thank you for joining us, because I know it's a bit earlier for you on your side of the country, so anyway, I appreciate it. But let me first start. I mentioned the article that we worked from last week, I think, or whenever, and you said in our email communication that you did get a chance to look at the video, and I wanted to first, before we get into anything else, let you respond or clarify, critique, or embellish on any of that conversation, and then we'll just act as if people have already seen it, and if they haven't, they can click the link below and go watch it, and we'll just pick up from there. But I wanted to start there with you this morning.
Okay. Well, let me first start after thanking you and appreciating being here and connected with your listeners and with your own scholarship and your very, very long work, to acknowledge that San Francisco State University, where I teach, sits on indigenous, unceded, stolen lands. I'm currently on the East Coast, which is on the land of the Lenape Nation, also another displaced indigenous people. And I come from Palestine, as you know. I'm not only a scholar of Palestine, I was born and raised in Palestine. And I would want anybody who goes and visits or lives or stays or does work, I would like people to acknowledge that. I am not very fond of people saying thank you for permitting us, because there has no permission been granted. People just come and live, right? Except for those communities who've been kidnapped and forced and enslaved and lived in this country against their will. And I'm speaking about the African people. So I want to, it's very, very important for us to contextualize where we come from, where we're at, what our history is all about. And so that's one thing to kind of really, really frame everything I do. Secondly, that I was elated when I was invited to respond to Assata Shakur's, to my people. I mean, this was a special issue that the Women's Studies Quarterly was organizing on protest. And I had all intentions to submit an article. And then I said, I've been having all these attacks against me by the Israel lobby, by white supremacists, right-wing groups, along with my university administrations, who has basically sold out the whole mission of San Francisco State as a social justice institution, because they keep marketing and selling out the 68th strike as if it was their own, but without actually paying any dues to the 68th strike. And so I've been subjected to all these attacks that have been make it impossible for me to sit down and write an article. So then I was asked if I would be interested in reviewing an article for this, and I said sure, I would be very interested in doing so, because I wanted to have something to do with that issue, because one of my areas of expertise is social movements, collective struggle, resistance, and so on. And so then the editors came back to me and said, we have better yet another thing for you. We do not know if you can do it. We have this essay by Assata Shakur called To My People, written in the 70s. And we are going to be asking 3 or 4 different people to respond to it. And we would really like for you to respond to it. They've also asked Angela Davis. They've also asked Charlene McCorders, and also asked Melanie Cervantes. And so I was just elated. I was just so happy. So I dug my teeth into it, and I wrote much longer, like twice the size of what they expected. But I think also, I'm a scholar activist. I'm a public intellectual, organic intellectual, I'd say. So to me, when they said they wanted to cut piece of it, I said, it's okay. There'll be always another opportunity to fill in what I wanted to discuss. So I focus on the 3 most important things that I thought maybe people who are interested in Assata Shakur and what she stood for and what she stands for and her words resonate with Palestine. To me, there were so many other ways. Every single word, you read it, every single word speaks to Palestine. Whether you're talking about the ways in which people who struggle for resistance are criminalized. And I'm saying criminalized, I'm not saying that we normalize criminalization, but are criminalized by the status quo, by the powers that be, by those in power, in order for them to continue the system going. This is that why they're doing it. But we get presented as criminals. We are never acknowledged as victims. One of the problems of the Palestinians that we actually have to spend time to say that, for example, Shireen Abu Akleh, the Palestinian journalist at Al Jazeera, who was killed by a sniper in her neck while she was wearing a helmet, she was wearing the vest that says press, by a very trained Israeli sniper from the Israeli intelligence, very specialized unit. This was a mistake. First, Israel said, no, it wasn't Palestinians who killed her. It was Palestinians who killed her, which is interesting, if you allow me, happened in at least two other cases that I'm working on. One is in the case of Shadan Abu Hijle, who was the grandmother of my nieces. My daughter is married to her daughter. And she was killed in 2002 during the Aqsa Intifada when an Israeli jeep stopped in front of her house. She was sitting towards the back end of the garden with her husband. He was picking oregano. Her son was behind her, who's a very well-known professor at Al-Najah National University, and who incidentally was imprisoned at the age of 12. He was one of the Palestinian prisoners who was imprisoned and tortured by Israel at the age of 12. And she was sitting embroidering, making something like what I'm wearing here, the borders of the kafiyah, the Palestinian embroidery. They stopped. They got out of the tank. They got out the machine guns and they walked to the house. She was inside the garden and they shot her and killed her. At that time, Israel had declared complete curfew. But nobody actually assumed that you're not even allowed to be sitting in your own garden. And then they went and for many months claimed that it was Palestinians who killed her. And Shadan Abu Hijle was one of the women who was involved in providing every single day food in boxes to families who were not being able to eat because of the curfew, because of the Israeli complete closure for work, because of people not being able to get to them in the Palestinian refugee camp in Balata, in the old city of Nablus. So they killed her. They took such a long time. And then finally it was an Israeli reporter, Akiva Dar, who investigated, and it was true enough, as her family claimed, she was killed by an Israeli, this is predetermined murder. A second case that I was looking at was the case of the young boy, Muhammad Abu Khdir, who was playing outside of his home on July 2014, 4 days ago, this anniversary, in Shu'afat, which is a suburb of Jerusalem, occupied Jerusalem, in the early mornings of Ramadan, outside of the mosque. Kids stay up sometimes because they go to the mosque, they eat the breakfast before they have to start their fast, right? Suhoor. And Israeli settlers stopped. They had come the day before and they beat up one of his cousins, Tariq Abu Khader, who's actually an Israeli citizen. He testified in Congress, lives in Florida. And then Muhammad Abu Khader, they kidnapped him in a car and they took him to a forest, nearby forest, built on the ruins of the Palestinian village Deir Yassin, which was completely decimated, completely erased, and on April 9th, 1948, to make way for the Zionists, actually. Israel was not founded yet. The Zionist militias who were trying to make their way between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, they three, one older man and two younger apprentices, I guess, apprentice settlers, apprentice racists, made him drink kerosene and they set him on fire. The kid was killed. Actually, he was burned alive. And then the Israeli police had the audacity to claim that it wasn't Palestinians. It was Palestinians who killed him. And they said, well, he was accused of being gay, and thus the family killed him. His family killed him, accusing him of cleansing family honor because he was queer. And as everybody in the world knows, Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims, people from marginalized communities, people of color, and so on, are excessively homophobic, are excessively sexist. It's supposed to be in our DNA. So this was the second case. It took a very long time. It actually was a video that his family had that Israeli police tried to take that showed the settlers coming in and picking him up. Then now we have the third one of Shireen Abu Akleh, who Israel actually claims that, it was Palestinians. And she works for Al Jazeera. So there were all this footage that there were no fighting in the area. She was clearly identified as a journalist. And they shot her and the bullet went through her neck. And it was not an accident. Yesterday, actually, the State Department, surprise, as you very well know, came out with a report saying that we accept the Israeli, they said an independent investigation said that the bullet actually came from an Israeli gun, but it was accidental, by mistake. The soldiers just happened to be there. By mistake, specialized snipers were there. By mistake, the bullet landed right in the neck, in the back of her neck. By mistake, it was a very specialized, highly Israeli military unit. By mistake, she was from Al Jazeera and she was one of the reporters who is voice of the truth of what's going on in the midst of Israel trying to cover up and its supporters trying to cover up what's going on. So this is really, I think it's really, really important in the sense that this also speaks to the reality. If we're talking about from Palestine to African American, to Black America, to Black in the US, if you don't want to mention America, the settler colonial state and so on. If you mention how is it that our people continuously are criminalized, continuously are accused of crimes, blame the victim is so clear. I mean, isn't that was the first story when George Floyd was murdered? 9 minutes, 9 full minutes, the guy is sitting on his neck and they're telling us that it was he's at fault. I mean, what was he supposed to say? He cried for his mother. He called for help. People were watching and standing by. 9 minutes did not occur to Chauvin. 9 minutes. His brain did not compute, and his brain did not compute that. Not because it's an accident, it's a malfunction of a person. Because we don't.
No, he was also on drugs, and Trayvon Martin was suspended for smoking weed, and Eric Gardner.
Ahmed Aubrey happened to be in the wrong place. Ahmed Aubrey was not supposed to be in this place. I mean, it's again and again. Amadou Diallo, 41 bullets. Eleanor Pamper. I mean, if you want to speak about from the history of the U.S., I mean, where do you start? Do you start with the kid?
But Dr. Abdulhadi.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to lose sight of something that I make sure I didn't miss something. You said that the article that we read
about Assata.
About Assata, you said there was a portion of it that was cut. What was cut, and what did you say?
It wasn't editing. It wasn't censorship. It was that
I'm not saying that. Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of issues. I wanted to talk about social movements. I wanted about self-organization. I had about like 5 or 6 different points that I wanted to make. And I mean, there is so many points, as you know. We can have 100 episodes to talk about it. And then it was just really too long. And, my own piece turned out like to be, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 words, while like Angela Davis had written 1,400 words. And I said, of course, I cut. And if you can cut and you can tell me, but these are the items that I really need to keep in. I want to keep in the whole question about how do people, communities, and peoples defend themselves. The whole question of what does self-defense mean in this sense, because it's always misunderstood. I wanted to speak about how we define ourselves and how we see ourselves. And I wanted specifically to speak to the particular points that when the article, and I'm really hoping to translate it to Arabic, actually resonates with people in Palestine. Because when people in Palestine will say, oh, the New Jersey Turnpike, checkpoint, believe me, the minute you say checkpoint, every Palestinian ear is going to be perked up and say, interesting, this is what's going on. Because, I mean, what happened after the killing of Michael Brown and the curfews, which was much more than earlier on. I mean, we know that in the 70s, that was the Contilpro and the killing of the Black Panthers. We know that always leaders are the best, and the bright are always blocked in order to prevent movements from growing. But I wanted to actually people to hear that and see and recognize that there are similarities. I'm not suggesting that the two contexts are the same. I don't want to conflate either. I think it's really each context stands on its own, and each community has its own histories, and it would be a crime for us actually to reduce everything exactly the same. But there are things about repression, about repressive mechanisms, about institutional bodies that read similar memos, that coordinate with each other, that apply similar tactics and so on. And that as this big video that Black for Palestine created, actually after Michael Brown was killed, say when we see them, we see us. And there were many people in it holding signs, either in the names of Black people who've been killed, murdered as a result of the system, or it was Palestinians who were killed, bringing the similarities together. And of course, I think, your show has already shown that we're not only talking about Black people, we're talking about the people of the world, the 99% of the people, third world people, whether third world people in the third world, in their own, where they come from, or the third world people who've either been kidnapped, who've either been assassinated, who either had to immigrate because the conditions in their countries got so bad, and then they come here. Also, they get treated very badly. Other, we're talking about the indigenous people of the land, that the U.S. had the settler colonialism, I would say. It wasn't U.S. then. 4 days ago, they quote unquote celebrated an independence of the U.S. settler colonial state from the colonial state. It's very, very interesting. It's kind of just like Israel. Israel on May 15th celebrates its independence from the British colonialism. We say, what independence are you talking about? This is settler U.S. state. You're actually creating a settler colonial state out of a colonial state. So this is all kind of like different degrees of the sophistication of colonialism and settler colonialism. So I think this is really, really important for us to also remind ourselves. And in this sense, for me, also the whole question of the fugitive slave patrols, of the raids, of the killing, of the plunder, of the stealing of the bones. And if I may say, for example, the bones of people who get stolen, like now there is so many, it's not only in the US and Canada, that indigenous people, First Nations are actually, we would like to get the remains of our children so we can bury them. Elsewhere in the world, there is many, I mean, Sarah Bartam was only finally received a dignified burial in South Africa only after political apartheid was defeated. And I undermine political apartheid because we know there's other also. But she was only able to do that because the African freedom movement demanded that she would be. We have over 400 bodies of Palestinian prisoners and Palestinian freedom fighters captive in Israeli either freezers under 500 degrees Celsius in freezer or in something called number cemetery. that Israel refuses to release those bodies to the families so they can bury their children, dignified burial, and just have some peace. I mean, it's already, the wounds are never going to be to be healing. But this is the same thing, and I've learned not long ago. Actually, I was at the People's Summit in Los Angeles, and one of the younger people who were picking us up, she said, "Well, don't forget the move in Philadelphia, that the bodies of the moved children are still being held by the United States." And some of them, I mean, this is the history is, as you know, so-called scientific studies happen on our life. Really the sad reality is that the story that is most well known is the story of the Holocaust and the Nazis, who've experimented on people's bodies in such nasty manner while they killed 6 million Jews in concentration camps. We need to have all the other stories of our communities around the world, of the theft, of the plunder, of the bones, of the experimentation, all of it, from the sterilization abuse to the la operation, or to the murder, to the lynching. I mean, you know, the last 2 days there was a story about Emmett Till, and your program. But I think all these stories coming together. I'm always constantly wondering, how do we teach? How do we teach? And my project is called Teaching Palestine, Pedagogical Practice and the Invisibility of Justice. How do we teach about that as a sense, in this sense here, justice in for Palestine is defined as part of the indivisibility of justice. How do we teach? How do we educate? How do we let our communities know about each other when there is every single attempt made to separate us from each other, to block the information from us knowing about each other, to pit us against each other, to have us not come together, because colonialist rule is divide and conquer. It's always a very old rule, and it continues until today. Whether the system is called colonialism, whether it's called Zionism, whether it's Islamophobia, whether it is anti-blackness, whether it is white supremacy, whether it is capitalism and greed. I mean, this is what they do, day in and day out. So how do we do that? How do we do that? So for me, the whole question, I mean, the being able to write this, I would just say, to give honor to Assata Shakur, whom her books, when her book came, it was one of the first books I assigned when I was an adjunct professor at Hunter College, my alma mater, and we read every single word. And then about her life and what she stands for, and then the way that she has been maligned as a figure of Black freedom, part because she was Black, and she is, part is because she is for Black freedom, part is because she says, I'm not going to follow your rules in order for us to liberate our people. I'm sorry, you are come up with the rules that benefit your continuation of repression. We have different ways of understanding things, and partly because also she is a woman. And also, as you know, women are not allowed, whether we talk about Layla Khalid, we're talking about Assata Shakur, we're talking about Dalal Mughrabi. Women are not just allowed. And there is all these tales that how women who participate in the defending their people are supposed to be abnormal. They're not really the normal women. And this again and again and again, we have so many examples from our communities, not just token representatives. And again and again and again, they keep on confronting us with all these issues. So to me, this was such a labor of love to be able to write it. It was also very painful, because every single time I'm writing it, I'm reminded of the violence. I'm reminded of the fact that she cannot come home. I mean, she is home in Cuba, but she cannot come home. She cannot be here with her family. She has to remain underground. You go to Cuba, you can't see her. I mean, you can. We went to Cuba and we tried, we asked, but you know, she has, and we respected that because she has to be protected. FBI put $2 million prize on her. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say quickly, shout out to let me mute you for the echo effect. Shout out to Layla Haddad, who briefly was my neighbor. We lived on the same street for a while, so shout out to her. You mentioned her. You said a number of things that I think are interesting, and I want to try to create a segue here, but I'm happy to have you come back to anything, obviously, that we can come back to any of that. But you mentioned, for instance, the African woman, you know, so-called Sarah Bartman, You've talked a little bit about even the narrative developed around Assata Shakur. And when you mentioned that, I thought of, because I just watched, and in fact, Geechee, if we had time today, I thought we might even look at it together. I had just watched the preview to a forthcoming movie starring Viola Davis about the African queen leading revolution against the Europeans. And I thought of Dr. Abdulhadi and one of the subjects you wanted us to get into today, and the cultural work, the value of the cultural struggle, in particular the work of Ghassan Kanafani, whose assassination was today, July 8th, 1972, by Mossad. And so I was thinking about all of that, given the way I understand, which is not very much, the way I understood how he engaged the fight of the cultural work, the role of art in revolution. And I'm often looking at the way imperialism uses symbolic overtures to revolution to suppress the political content in the moment. So I'm looking at that preview. I'm looking at some work of Kanafani, trying to prepare for today. And I thought that I would ask you what you think, given the context of Kanafani's assassination, how people in struggle should view popular entertainment, popular media, culture, and engage that cultural war. Because I thought it was also very interesting that, and then I will stop here, that in one of his responses in a video clip I watched, Kanafani talked about, he used the phrase the cultural nationalism of the United States. And in most of the work, I know our space is familiar with, cultural nationalism means something bit different, and often from the context of the African people struggling upwards, so to speak. But there is this cultural nationalism of the West, that we have to engage in. Anyway, so please respond in any way you like to.
Yes, thank you. I was actually going to say, yes, today is we honor the martyr, Ghassan Kanafani, and actually it's really, it's very rewarding that there are so many young people today all over the world, Palestinian youth in particular, but all Palestinians are actually honoring Ghassan Kanafani in one way or another, whether discussing his multiple books and art. He was an installation graphic. He actually designed. He was an artist. He used to write. He was a journalist. He's the one who edited and created the magazine Al Hadaf, which was one of the first, actually the first one in the Arab world to employ the tabloid form, and it used to be 70 pages. 70 pages, people will say today, oh, wow, give me a soundbite of 2 minutes. I have no time to read. But people were devouring the 70 pages. And I was listening in preparation. We had a big event yesterday. I was listening in preparation, kind of trying to refresh my memory and learn more. Of course, we always have a chance to learn more. And one of the former managing editors of Al Hadaf said that, somebody asked them, well, how did you sustain yourself? This is a magazine of the people. And Ghassan Kanafani's slogan was, Al-Haqiqa kull al-Haqiqa lil-Jamahir. Truth, the whole truth to the people. And so in order to be able to provide that, so one of the managing editors jumps in and says, you know that the dues for the subscription of the magazine, at one point, dues from Arab students in the United States used to subsidize the magazine, because the magazine $1 was supposed to be $1, 70 pages deployed, and imagine shipping it from Beirut or Syria or Cyprus all the way to the US and clearing it in custom, and you can imagine all of these things. That's another subject of discussion. How are you even able to rescue a piece of culture of resistance, which is different than cultural nationalism, right? To bring it to readers and so on. And students are supposed to pay $1. And students are always heartbroken, as you know, especially students who are studying far away from home. They're not qualified for any kind of loans whatsoever. I mean, it's really hard. So they always used to work under the table in order for them to be able not only to support themselves, but also to send money, remittances back home to support their families and so on. And so he said, well, some students it's $1, some students will pay $10 for the subscription, some will say $20, depending on what they were able to do. Now, what Kanafani also did is exactly, I think he was engaged in culture of resistance. And I think this is a place which we can talk about. And I think this program is a very, very amazing place to talk about that fertile, both because you've dealt with it and you continue dealing with it, and because of also the audience that we are all the truth to the masses. And so when we say about the truth to the masses, he's not actually concerned by the hostile masses, he's concerned by our own people. So it actually speaks to Assata Shakur, to my people. He is actually speaking to my people. He is not really as concerned of what the colonialist powers and the imperialist powers mean. But there is a cultural nationalism of the US. And I would distinguish it from the culture of resistance that our people use. And I would also distinguish it from even the notion when we say Afrocentrism, Black nationalism, and so on, because these are different terms. And people lump it together. And in one of my work, actually my doctoral dissertation, I actually dealt with the whole concept of nationalism and said not all nationalisms are the same. You group them all under one in order for you to say anti-colonial nationalist liberation movements, anti-racist movements, movements that are seeking to liberate themselves, whether we talk about the Black Panther Party, American Indian movement, the Palestinian movement, the South African movement, the movement in Mozambique, in Congo, in Puerto Rico, in Brazil, I mean, so anywhere in the world, in the United States, wherever, Turtle Island, North America, these movements have a different kind of nationalism, and that particular way of nationalism. And I think in this sense, I like to use the framework of Benedict Anderson when he called nationalism imagined communities. In the sense, I don't agree with a lot of the things that he said, but this is really important. He said that people participate in these communities as nations because they envision themselves being in horizontal comradeship, participating in it. And then another despicable character, Ernest Renan, who was actually really a big colonist, Orientalist, a Christian Islamophobe in the 1700s, actually said that participating in the nation is a daily plebiscite. But the nation is this nation that I'm talking about, and I'm using it as a community, broadly speaking, in the sense that every single day, you, me, Geechee, right? Is that the way? Is that correctly? Okay. Geechee or anybody who's with us here, coming into this conversation, participating in this space, every day we decide. People decided when George Floyd was being killed to stand and videotape. Decided. They did not just happen to do it. They actually decided that they're going, at the risk of their own life, they're going to videotape. People decided to go to a protest. People decided to take time to watch a documentary. People decide to engage with other people and understand the reality and so on. So I think this is to understand what are we talking about, anti-colonial national liberation movements, which gets a bum rap from all the colonists and so on, because nobody is allowed to actually think about what nationalism means, what their sense of community means, and so on, except the colonists, except the Zionists, South African Boers, United States white supremacists. They are allowed to do that. The English, French nationalism is so easy to understand because it's a nationalism of humanities, and I'm putting it in quote. But our people are not allowed to actually think about that. And we're contested and we're called racist, reverse racism, not engaging in things. Now, I do want to clarify a little bit more. What cultural nationalism, what does it mean when people in the United States today practice what is called US cultural nationalism? 4 days ago, July 4th. I don't understand. What is it? Why is it that people celebrate a flag that actually signifies destruction and domination? Why is it that they sing an anthem that enshrines slavery and repression? What is it about people who say, oh, this is our country? It's very interesting. It's our country. It's not even their country. It's a country that belongs to indigenous people. Nobody invited. I mean, them, right? Nobody. It's there. It's the country of land. And indigenous communities actually say that we don't even own the land. We have an organic relationship with the land. The land loves us and we love the land back. And that's the kind of relationship. And actually, if you go to Palestine too, most of the lands are not registered because just peasants go and, till and farm and so on and so forth. Same way in many parts of the world, whether you're talking about Hawaii, we're talking about Puerto Rico, you talk about Asia and so on, where colonialism went and actually plundered and took over, and now they're building all these condos and all these vacation spots. And if you look at the New York Times real estate section, and I do every week, you can see all these villas that are being advertised in all our communities, where the people from our own communities, if they are lucky, they'll get a chance to work to maintain, right? These buildings for these people who are making money and money and money, whether you're talking about Silicon Valley, whether you're talking the excessive greed, whether you're implementing Ayn Rand mission of this, not even the liberal capitalism of Adam Smith, the invisible hand of the market, but it's actually regulated towards enabling it. So this is the cultural nationalism that the United States exercise. And it also today, if Ghassan Kanafani were alive today, I bet you he might even take the phenomena, the cultural phenomena. And when I say cultural, I don't mean a fluffy thing, because culture is very materialist. There is material foundations of culture. And in the study of culture, I adopt Stuart Hall perspective of the Birmingham School of Critical Cultural Studies, that is also Williams and other people have participated in. That is very, 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 very foundational and materialist, in the sense that when they are celebrating that, they are actually talking about their own goods and so on. So if Kanafani were here today, I would wonder, if I were going to meet Kanafani, and I'm not, one of the things that I would do is I would actually maybe bring him one of those caps that say Blue Lives Matter. And I will bring him one of the signs that have been painted over, destroyed, all the murals that have happened all over, Black Lives Matter, that have been vandalized, including even signs that people put on their front lawns, including white people who are defining the white supremacist cultural nationalism of the United States. And I would give it to them and say, here, what do you think, Ghassan? And I'm sure he would write a whole piece. I don't even know what would be in his mind. He was a genius writer, theorist, intellectual. And this is also why, and Ghassan Kanafani always said, al-kalima al-bunduqiyya, the word is a sword, the word is the gun, that we can also fight with our words. He, by the way, never carried a gun. He never ever had training in military, in armed resistance. He did not even know that. But for the repressive forces, for the Golda Meir, he was on the Golda Meir list. She was the prime minister of Israel who authorized his killing. He was on the list that on the Mossad squad that was led by Ehud Barak, who was the prime minister of Israel. That people in the US might find the news in 2001, 2002. He was called in the US by Clinton that he offered Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat a generous offer, which Palestinians call it Swiss cheese, because it was kind of like a state with all holes in it and barricades and checkpoints and so on. You couldn't, it was really not an offer, but the US media is very good at spinning that. But think about, why was Ghassan Kanafani killed? And why are they assassinating, from Patrice Lumumba to Ruth First, to Don Alpiso Campos, who was assassinated in prison, to Wadi Haddad, who was killed at the age of 39, to the Black Panthers, 21 in one time, and more and more and more. Why is it that Mumia Abu Jamal is still in prison? Why is it that Leonard Peltier is still in prison? Why is it that there are, again, more and more and more and more people? And if you want to say, US also claims in their cultural nationalism, they have all these set of things, including a fair justice system, criminal justice system. Of course, in itself is an oxymoron. Criminal justice, how is that? How is that justice? But there is a way to actually basically have this quote-unquote deterrence, not deterrence from committing crimes or injuring your fellow human being members of your community because we have transformative justice mechanism to deal with that without the police. But why is it that they are actually so intent in doing that? And why is it that they are escalating? Because the cultural nationalism of the United States, of white supremacy, fortifying the borders in fortresses, preventing people from coming and going, again, as if it is really the land belongs to them and they got it free. Why is it that they are doing all of these things? And we need to kind of just remind ourselves that this is because whenever we become more of a threat, it escalates. So whenever it escalates, it's a sign that they're taking notice and they are trying to crush what is going on. And these are forms. And then there is all the ideological, intellectual components of it that has to do with the cultural nationalism. And when he says cultural, it has cultural perspectives to it. So in a way, people try to denigrate cultural work, artwork, hip hop, poetry, all sorts of ways and forms in which our communities do not have the resources to go paint the Renoirs and the Matisses and the Lacroix that hang in the Louvre, in the Metropolitan Museum, and a lot of that is stolen also from the Third World, and a lot of it is inspired by that. Yeah.
But Dr. Abdulhadi, I'm sorry to jump in, but that's sort of what I wanted you to talk a little bit about in terms of Kanafani's work in particular and his life in particular, particularly for those of us who don't know much about him. So, for instance, when you list off him on and include him among a list of names that some of us would be more familiar with, but who are known for much more militant and aggressive political activity. Some of them are, at least reported to have been involved in armed struggle and so on and so forth. But from what I understand, again, not much of Kanafani, is that he is known as a cultural worker, as an author, as a poet. Why is it important to understand particularly from the point from the perspective of imperialism and settler colonialism, the threat from that they draw a parallel between cultural work and even militant organized work? They draw a parallel and respond in kind. And I'm wondering, so if you could talk a little bit about Kanafani's work and what made him a threat in that.
Let me mention something about Kanafani, and let me also remind ourselves too that after 2001, the U.S. Pentagon was being trained in cultural work, and they were being shown the Battle of Algiers, the film, the Battle of Algiers. They were being taught to read Frantz Fanon, and it was the late Manning Barable at Columbia University, the editor of Soul, who actually intervened and demanded that the Pentagon remove these from the syllabi.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. It was and that's how they removed them. There was also another book called
I do remember, I'm sorry to interrupt again. Because I do remember Condoleezza Rice saying, she was saying we need more funding for what was effectively propaganda, because she said the war is going to be fought in the newsrooms of New York, Paris, London, etc. So she was saying we need more in that sort of cultural media work. So sorry for that. Sorry,
no, that's fine. There was this book I was talking about called The Arab Mind, written by an Israeli Zionist, Raphael Patai, that actually argued that Arabs only understand to be killed or to be bribed. I mean, this is as if it's in our DNA. I mean, so where is this, how is this being translated in the US? There is so many more things. But let me just say about Kanafani, to just give him his due. Kanafani was born on April 9th, 1936, in a city called Akka, Palestine, which actually was the city that defied and defeated Napoleon. I mean, this is the people don't really know that, right? And Napoleon, with all his arrogance, right? I mean, this is, and when France celebrated Napoleon, they did not mention that. They did not bring up this history, because it was a very, very big defeat. I mean, he was strutting throughout the world, thinking that he's going to colonize everything, and Akka stopped him. His birth date, April 9th, is also the same birthday that he shares with Layla Khalid, with the Palestinian feminist icon and militant Layla Khalid, who he was actually the press spokesperson when she and her comrade hijacked planes, he was the one who was actually giving the press conferences, speaking to the media, and so on. His English was better. He was also a journalist. He was the editor of Al-Hadaf. He was the spokesperson.
Oh, so you earlier you weren't saying Layla Haddad. You were saying
no,
Layla
Khaled.
I misspoke.
No, Layla Khaled. I thought that you
was not her neighbor. I was not
no, that's fine.
My apologies.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about the Gaza kitchen. That's fine. Layla Haddad is an amazing woman too, but she is not accuser of that, because then they're going to put her in prison tomorrow.
Right.
But,
I was going to say,
but also her book. But also, if you want to talk about cultural work, just to mention a couple of, if you read the New York Times food section on Wednesday, a lot of these recipes, a lot of these Israeli and Zionist writers claim that they just discovered za'atar, or they just discovered sumac. I mean, they're always putting all these recipes that kind of like, they don't even acknowledge where they come. They're getting a little bit better about indigenous and black culture and food and so on. But with us, with Palestinians, with Arabs and Muslims, forget it. All of it is appropriated. We're still in the pre-colonialist phase. But to go back to Ghassan Kanafani, April 9th also is the anniversary of the Deir Yassin massacre that I mentioned, which is the village on which the forest where Muhammad Abu Khdair was killed. That is also the anniversary of Deir Yassin in 1948. Ghassan Kanafani founded Al-Hadaf before he was the editor of Al-Hurriya, which was a magazine that was bought by the Arab National Movement. He was member of the Arab National Movement, which was founded in 1952 by Dr. George Habash and Dr. Wadi Haddad, and doctors in medical doctors. They were two young Palestinians whose families were displaced in 1948, and they were in Beirut. They studied at the American University of Beirut, and they learned, you're going to find this twist interesting too, and in sort of like triggers, memories. They were also mentored by a man named Constantin Zrek, who was an intellectual at the American University of Beirut, and set up a study group and picked by hand people like George Habash and Wadi Haddad to mentor them in the art of history, revolution, consciousness, and so on. Sort of reminds you of Robert F. Williams and his mentoring of the Panthers and other people and so on, and the sessions Malcolm X held, and we also watched them anyway. So the Arab National Movement was one of the largest movements in the Arab world. In 1952, 4 years after Nakba was set up, and it included members in all over, from Kuwait to Iraq to the Gulf to Oman to Yemen to the Arabian Peninsula. We don't refer to it as Saudi Arabia because we do not recognize a family's ownership of a country, to Egypt, to Tunisia, to Libya, to Algeria, and so on and so forth. And the Arab National Movement, along with an organization in Lebanon called Organization of Communist Action, bought Al-Hurriya in 1959, I believe. And then this was the paper that they had. And then he founded Al-Hadaf later on, as I think it was in 1969, 70. I'll check the exact date now. And it became actually read. It was the place where a lot of Arab intellectual radicals were publishing. It was in Beirut because Beirut was the place for the Arab, where the Arab Lebanese national movement, again, anti-colonial national movement, refusing the sectarianism imposed by the West and left over to Lebanon as a result of the 1943 French Constitution. When French withdrew from Lebanon in 1943, they left behind the Constitution that assigned division of power in Lebanon to various religious sects. So people say today, oh, there is sectarianism in Lebanon. Who introduced it? It was the colonist powers that did that. Same way Israel divides Palestinians into Muslim, doesn't say Arabs, by the way. There is no recognition of Arabs in Israel. Muslims, Christians, Druze, and Bedouins. Muslim and Christians, okay, religious. Druze is one religious community. Bedouins, what's Bedouins? Bedouins are people who are living in Naqab, who don't call themselves Bedouin. And you know, in anthropology, this is a derogatory term. And so there is all of these things that happen. Anyway, but Beirut was the capital of Arab thought, Arab freedom. People, all the opposition forces from the Arab world will go to live in Beirut, but it was also the place where the CIA, I guess, and the Mossad and so on were there. Al-Hadaf and Ghassan Kanafani actually was the first one who gave Najir Ali, the Palestinian caricature designer who was assassinated in London in the 80s, who is, you might know, he is the creator of figure Hamdallah, the little cartoon child who is who's barefoot, has no clothes on, has his back to the world, 10 years old, and he's representing a Palestinian refugee that will never turn around till Palestine is liberated and refugees are allowed to go back. And of course, Kanafani also was a refugee who was displaced. Ghassan Kanafani meets Rajil Ali at Ain al-Hilwa refugee camp in south of Lebanon. And Kanafani is this like a sensitive writer, author, sort of like laid back James Baldwin kind of style, right? Not a combative style, very, very calm, you know, speaking, but very combative in their argument. And if you watch the interview that he's done with one of the representatives, Carlton from Australian TV, that's actually very wide, very now being watched a lot on the internet. And Kanafani is asked, why wouldn't you ask for peace? And Kanafani says, peace for what? And she said, just for peace. And you said, what do you mean just for peace? Why won't you talk to the Israelis? Talk about them, why? And the guy says, for whatever. What do you mean for whatever? This is the dialogue itself.
He said, I think it's the same one where he said, the guy says, why don't you sit down with the Israelis and talk to them? And he said, why? He said, that's like a conversation between the sword and the neck.
Exactly.
I was like, that's slick, right?
And this is like, I was just now, I don't know if it's okay, if it's makes sense or something, or it's redundant to actually do maybe another conversation between Assata, Shakur and Kanafani, or maybe have James Baldwin involved in it, or get Robert F. Williams, or, we have tons, we have enough. And I think this is one of the things that even from your show, I want to really give a call to actually really talk about what our historian colleagues will call social history, small social histories, rather than talking about the big story. This happens here. This happened, 1812 happened here. 1812 now because they're talking about a lot of Ukraine and so on, and they think this is really an important 1812 overseas. But Kanafani was the one who actually introduced, asked Najil Ali to put his paintings, drawings in Al-Hadaf. And Kanafani says to him, and one of the drawings Kanafani shows him, which is really very interesting, and I didn't even think of it today because we're in the context of this show, that he showed him a tent and a pyramid. And Kanafani says, why a tent and a pyramid? He said, well, the pyramid is for the Egyptians, a tent is for the Palestinians. And he said, why did you put them together? He said, well, Ali says, this is because the pyramid is where ancient Egyptians went to die. And the tent, if we don't liberate ourselves, is where Palestinians will die. And they have this ongoing, it's a beautiful dialogue that I found one Palestinian writer, Shakur Nabulsi, has captured, which is also not known. It's not even known in Palestinian circuit because it shows how much more work we have to do and how much more work, critical, creative, cultural work to honor Kanafani. The stories that he has written, one of the very major stories that he has written was called Aid ila Haifa, Return to Haifa. And he writes it about two Palestinian parents going to Haifa, the place from where they came and from where, by the way, Layla Khalid came. And when we were on a delegation that included one of my colleagues who's from the Lenape Nation, my colleague introduces herself and says, I'm from the Lenape Nation and we've been displaced. And Layla responds to her and says, I'm a refugee too. And I come from Haifa and I can't go back. So before we finished the meeting and we were going to Palestine, we're meeting with her in Jordan. We said, what would you like us to do? And she said, just give me a little sand from Haifa, from Haifa's coast. Because, Shat Haifa and Yafa were very, very famous. Kanafani spent, after 12 years of his life, he spent in Yafa. So Haifa and Yafa are very symbolic in Palestine. A lot of Palestinian songs begin with Haifa or Yafa before even we talk about the West Bank. They need to be liberated. So it's really It's very, very, very interesting. But so there is this dialogue, and dialogue almost kind of debate between Kanafani and Al-Ali. And anybody who's watching it from quote unquote the polite society of the US cultural nationalism would say, oh, they're fighting. And we always say, no, we don't fight. We're actually debating with each other. We're arguing because every one of us is pushing the other in the sense of critical race theory, in the sense of critical race theory, critical criticism, and race in placing race in the place of actually also its material context. We're always debating with each other. We argue, we fight, we scream at each other and so on, and then we go have dinner with each other because we are in it, because we have a collective project to do so. So this is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful dialogue that yesterday, I mean, I guess last week when I was reading more and more and more, and now somebody asked me to find out where Kanafani and Najil Ali met each other. And to me, it's very important because we have a mural at San Francisco State University that the Zionists and the university administration forced us to remove Hamdallah from it, the cartoon character from it, who is holding a pen in one hand, which is my pen is my sword, al-kalima al-bunduqiyya, my word is my gun, as the Ghassan Kanafani. And in the other hand, he's carrying a key, and on top of it is written al-awda, return, which symbolizes the fate, because majority of the Palestinians are actually refugees. And the United University refused to allow us to have Hamdallah on it. So Hamdallah had to be removed. We placed in his place cactus, symbolizing the over 532 Palestinian villages that were destroyed in 1948. But on the day of the inauguration of the mural, all the Palestinian kids, and I think they would, forgive me for saying kids because I'm much older than them, and all the black kids and indigenous kids and the Latinas and the Asian, all of them came wearing t-shirts with Hamdallah on them. So now Hamdallah lives even. If he had been on the mural, he might have not been even seen as much.
Yeah.
Another connection I just want to say with Hamdallah, because I think it's also very interesting for your readers, and it's very close to us. At San Jose State University, there were two black athletes who won the gold and the silver medals in 1968 Olympics in Mexico, right? Mm-hmm. And when they received their awards, they raised their fists, mm-hmm, and they refused to the OSE, which we talk about, the anthem that does not speak for all of us. This is not we the people, right? We know this is the cultural national. And they did not have shoes on. They were barefoot. And when I speak in Palestinian context and bring the comparative together, I think of the athletes who were just like Hamdallah. We're not wearing shoes. We are symbolizing the 400 years of enslavement, of repression, of racism that's going on. That then becomes also culminated in the manifesto, I would say revolutionary manifesto, that Assata Shakur writes into my people. I mean, she's all her writing. This is, I was assigned this piece, so I was just enamored with it and so on. And she speaks about it. And so this brings kind of like, there's the Hamdallah, and it's not the same. And I don't want to say we're all Hamdallah. I don't want to say we're all Tamili. We're not. This is different context in it. But there is so many similarities that bring us together.
Dr. Abdulhadi, unfortunately, we have to wrap there. The issue is me. I got a tight schedule, unfortunately, got to run. But I just want to say again, it's been long overdue, but greatly appreciated that you would join us this morning. It's not enough, so we have to do this again. And next time we will work on the audio quality so that there's no interruption at all in the message. But I just want to thank you very much for coming through this morning and sharing a little bit with us. I definitely want to start immediately working with you to have you come back, because there's so much more to get to. But so yeah, I just wanted to say thank you and give you any parting words. But until next time, thank you very much.
I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I want to thank you, if I may, on behalf of Palestinians who are struggling for justice for all, who see ourselves as your sisters and brothers and siblings. We are in the struggle together, and I'm so honored to have them hosted at your show and being able to discuss this very important, intellectually exciting, as well as politically necessary struggles that will bring justice and another world for all our people. So thank you.
Right on. Thank you very much, and peace to you as well. And look forward to catching up with you again next time. Thank you very much.